The old rotary phone sat on Cassandra Moore's nightstand, a relic from her grandmother's estate. Its black surface gleamed dully in the soft lamplight, a stark contrast to the sleek smartphone charging beside it. Cassandra had kept it out of sentiment, never expecting it to ring. After all, it wasn't even connected to a phone line. But on a quiet Tuesday night, as rain tapped gently against her bedroom window, the impossible happened. The old phone rang, its shrill bell cutting through the silence like a knife. Cassandra stared at the phone, her heart racing. Slowly, as if in a trance, she reached out and lifted the heavy receiver to her ear. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Cassandra, listen carefully," came the reply. The voice was familiar, eerily so. "This is you. From 1 year in the future. You're in danger." Cassandra nearly dropped the phone. This had to be a joke, a prank call somehow routed through the disconnected line. But as the voice continued, sharing details of her life that no one else could know, a chill ran down her spine. "Tomorrow morning, don't take your usual route to work," her future self warned. "There's going to be a terrible accident on 5th Avenue. If you're there, you won't survive." The line went dead before Cassandra could respond. She sat in stunned silence, the receiver still pressed to her ear, listening to the empty dial tone. Sleep eluded her that night. Cassandra tossed and turned, torn between dismissing the call as a vivid dream and heeding its ominous warning. When morning came, she made a last-minute decision to take a different route to work. Later that day, she learned of a multi-car pileup on 5th Avenue, exactly where she would have been driving. The news reported multiple fatalities. Shaken to her core, Cassandra returned home that evening, her mind reeling. As she entered her bedroom, the old phone rang again. This time, she didn't hesitate to answer. "How is this possible?" she demanded. "I don't have time to explain," her future self replied, urgency in her voice. "You need to listen. In 3 days, don't go to the grocery store after work. There's going to be a robbery. If you're there, you'll be taken hostage." Once again, the call ended abruptly. Cassandra stood there, the receiver clutched tightly in her hand, fear and confusion warring within her. Over the next few weeks, the calls continued. Each time, her future self would warn her of some impending danger. A fire in her apartment building, a food poisoning outbreak at her favorite restaurant, a mugging in the park she frequented. Cassandra's life became a tightrope walk of fear and paranoia. She found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, second-guessing every decision. The world seemed full of hidden dangers, disasters lurking around every corner. Her friends and family began to notice the change in her. Cassandra grew pale and withdrawn, dark circles forming under her eyes from sleepless nights spent waiting for the next warning call. As she followed each instruction from her future self, narrowly avoiding one catastrophe after another, a nagging question began to form in her mind. If she was changing her fate with each averted disaster, how was her future self still in a position to call and warn her? The answer came on a stormy night, exactly 1 year after the first call. The old phone rang, and Cassandra answered with a sense of dread. "It's time you understood," her future self said, her voice heavy with resignation. "Every danger I've warned you about, every disaster you've avoided, they were all meant to lead you away from one moment, one critical point in time." Cassandra listened, her breath caught in her throat, as her future self explained. There was a fixed point in her timeline, an event so catastrophic that it rippled backwards through time. Her future self had been trying to change that event by altering the path that led to it. "But it's not working," future Cassandra said, despair evident in her voice. "No matter what changes we make, that moment still comes. And it's tonight, Cassandra. In 1 hour. Panic gripped Cassandra. "What do I do?" she pleaded. "How do I stop it?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You can't stop it," her future self finally said. "I've tried through countless loops. The more we change, the more it stays the same. The universe wants this to happen." Cassandra felt her legs give way and she sank to the floor, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "Then why?" she whispered. "Why tell me all this if I can't change anything?" "Because," her future self replied, "in all the loops, in all the attempts to change fate, this is the only variable that remains constant. This conversation right now. And I've come to realize, maybe it's not about changing the event. Maybe it's about facing it with open eyes." As the full weight of her future self's words sank in, Cassandra felt a strange calm settle over her. The fear that had been her constant companion for the past year began to ebb away. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steady for the first time in months. "Now," her future self said softly, "you wait, and when the moment comes you face it with courage, because that's who we are, Cassandra. Survivors." The line went dead for the final time. Cassandra set the receiver down gently, then stood and walked to her window. Outside, the storm was intensifying, lightning illuminating the sky in brilliant flashes. As she stood there watching the tempest rage, Cassandra felt a sense of peace wash over her. The future was coming, inexorable as the tide, but this time she would meet it head-on, armed with the knowledge that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. The old phone sat silent on her nightstand, its purpose fulfilled. And Cassandra Moore, her fear replaced by determination, turned to face whatever destiny had in store for her. The city of Ravensbrook had always been a place of secrets. Its narrow streets and looming buildings seemed to whisper of hidden truths, of stories untold. But none of its mysteries could compare to what lay beneath its surface, waiting to be discovered. Jake Holloway was an urban explorer, always seeking the thrill of the unknown. He had crawled through abandoned buildings, scaled forgotten towers, and delved into long-sealed tunnels. But nothing had prepared him for what he would find beneath the streets of Ravensbrook. It began with an old map found in a dusty antique shop. The yellowed paper showed a network of tunnels and chambers beneath the city, far more extensive than any official records suggested. Jake's heart raced with excitement as he traced the intricate pathways with his finger. On a moonless night, Jake slipped into an abandoned subway station, armed with only a backpack of supplies and his trusty flashlight. The air was thick with dust and the musty scent of decay. His footsteps echoed in the emptiness as he made his way deeper into the station. Behind a rusted maintenance door, Jake found what he was looking for: a narrow passage that wasn't on any official blueprints. He squeezed through, his excitement building with each step. The passage sloped downward, leading him deeper beneath the city. After what felt like hours of walking, the narrow tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Jake's flashlight beam danced across damp stone walls covered in strange, swirling patterns. At the center of the chamber stood a stone archway, its surface etched with symbols Jake had never seen before. As he approached the arch, a chill ran down his spine. There was something wrong about this place, something that set every nerve on edge. But Jake's curiosity overpowered his fear. He stepped through the arch. The world seemed to shift around him. The air grew colder, heavy with an otherworldly scent. Jake found himself in a labyrinth of twisting corridors and chambers, each more bizarre than the last. In one room, he found walls lined with jars containing things that might once have been human. In another, strange machines hummed with an energy that made his skin crawl. Everywhere he looked, there were signs of an ancient and terrible knowledge that had been hidden away from the world above. Jake's flashlight flickered, the beam growing weaker. Shadows seemed to move at the edge of his vision, always retreating when he turned to look. He could hear whispers echoing through the corridors, speaking in languages that had never been meant for human ears. As he delved deeper into the labyrinth, Jake began to realize the true nature of what he had discovered. This was no mere network of tunnels. It was a place where the barriers between worlds had grown thin, where things from beyond could seep through into our reality. In a vast chamber, Jake found ancient murals depicting creatures of nightmare. Tentacled horrors and shapeless abominations cavorted across the walls. And at the center of it all, a being of such cosmic terror that Jake's mind recoiled from its image. He turned to flee, only to find his way blocked by shadows that had taken on solid form. Eyes gleamed in the darkness, belonging to things that should not exist in our world. Jake ran, his heart pounding in his chest, no longer caring about exploration or discovery. He wanted only to escape. The labyrinth seemed to shift around him, corridors changing and rearranging themselves. Jake was lost, each turn bringing him face to face with new horrors. He saw things that defied description, heard sounds that no human throat could produce. His flashlight died, plunging him into darkness. Jake stumbled forward, guided only by his desperate need to escape. He could feel unseen things brushing against him in the dark, their touch leaving trails of icy coldness on his skin. Just when he thought all hope was lost, Jake saw a glimmer of light ahead. He ran towards it, ignoring the whispers that grew to shrieks behind him. The light grew brighter, and suddenly he was bursting out of a hidden doorway, back into the abandoned subway station. Jake collapsed on the platform, gasping for air. He looked back at the doorway he had emerged from, only to see smooth, unbroken wall. There was no sign of the passage he had taken, no evidence of the horrors he had witnessed. For a moment, Jake wondered if it had all been a hallucination, a trick of his mind in the darkness underground. But then he felt something in his pocket. With trembling hands, he pulled out a small object he didn't remember picking up. A strange, multifaceted crystal that pulsed with an inner light. As he stared at the crystal, Jake realized that his ordeal was far from over. He had escaped the labyrinth, but he had brought something back with him. Something that was never meant to see the light of day. In the days that followed, Jake tried to return to his normal life. But he found himself plagued by nightmares of what he had seen in the depths. Shadows seemed to follow him, and he could swear he heard whispers in languages no human should know. The crystal he had brought back pulsed stronger each day, and strange occurrences began to happen around him. Objects moved on their own, and people reported seeing impossible things in the corners of their eyes. Jake realized he had opened a door that could not easily be closed. The horrors of the labyrinth were seeping into the world above, drawn by the crystal he carried. He knew he had to find a way to seal the breach, to return the crystal to the depths where it belonged. But as he prepared to venture back into the underground, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the labyrinth was waiting for him, that this time it might not let him leave. The urban explorer had found more than he bargained for, and now he faced a choice: to try and undo what he had done, or to let the horrors he had unleashed reshape the world above. As night fell over Ravensbrook, Jake made his decision. He would return to the depths, to face whatever awaited him in the darkness below. The city held its breath, unaware of the battle about to be fought beneath its streets. A battle to keep the horrors of the labyrinth where they belonged, hidden and forgotten in the shadows of the earth. In the quiet suburb of Willow Creek, Olivia Bennett lived a life of routine and predictability. By day, she worked as a librarian, surrounded by the comforting smell of old books and the hushed whispers of patrons. But at night, when she closed her eyes, Olivia's world transformed into a kaleidoscope of vivid dreams that left her breathless and confused. It began innocently enough. Olivia would wake with the lingering scent of roses, though there were none in her apartment. She dismissed it as a quirk of her imagination, a remnant of particularly fragrant dreams. But soon the line between sleep and waking began to blur. One morning, Olivia found a feather on her pillow, identical to one she had plucked from a giant bird in her dream. She stared at it, her heart racing. It was impossible, and yet there it was, soft and real between her fingers. As days passed, more inexplicable things occurred. The taste of exotic fruits lingered on her tongue, though her refrigerator contained only the usual staples. Mud caked her feet after dreams of running through forests, and once she woke to find her hair damp with salt water after dreaming of swimming in a moonlit ocean. Olivia began to dread falling asleep. Each night, she fought against her heavy eyelids, terrified of what new impossibility might manifest in her waking world. But sleep always claimed her, dragging her into dreams more vivid than ever before. In her dreams, Olivia wandered through twisted landscapes. Cities made of crystal rose from barren deserts. Forests of trees with leaves of fire whispered secrets in voices like crackling flames. And always, at the edge of her vision, a figure watched. Tall and cloaked in shadow, it never came closer, but Olivia felt its gaze like a physical touch. One night, Olivia dreamed of a carnival. The air was thick with the scent of caramel apples and cotton candy. Colorful tents stretched as far as the eye could see, and the sound of calliope music filled the air. As she wandered through the fairgrounds, a fortune teller called out to her. "Come, dreamer," the old woman crooned, her eyes glittering in the lamplight. "Let me read your fate." Olivia hesitated, then stepped into the tent. The fortune teller grasped her hand, tracing the lines on her palm. Suddenly, the old woman's eyes widened in fear. "You walk between worlds," she whispered. "The veil grows thin. Beware the Dreamweaver, for he seeks to claim you." Olivia woke with a start, her heart pounding. On her bedside table sat a tarot card, the moon, that hadn't been there when she went to sleep. Terrified, Olivia sought help. She visited doctors who found nothing wrong with her physically. Therapists suggested stress or an overactive imagination, but none of their explanations could account for the physical evidence of her dreams. As weeks passed, the boundary between dream and reality became increasingly blurred. Olivia would be at work, filing books, when suddenly the library would shimmer and transform into an ancient temple, only to snap back to normal moments later. She began to see the shadowy figure from her dreams in waking life. It would stand at street corners, watching her from alleyways, always vanishing when she tried to approach. Olivia's fear grew, along with a strange sense of anticipation. One night, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Olivia decided to confront the figure in her dreams. As she drifted off to sleep, she focused all her will on finding the shadowy watcher. Her dream took shape around her, a vast, empty ballroom with mirrors for walls. In the center stood the figure, no longer hiding in the shadows. As Olivia approached, it turned, revealing a face both beautiful and terrifying in its otherworldliness. "Who are you?" Olivia demanded, her voice echoing in the empty space. "Why are you doing this to me?" The figure smiled, a gesture that sent chills down Olivia's spine. "I am the Dreamweaver," it said, its voice like silk and thunder combined. "And you, Olivia Bennett, are a rare soul, one who can bridge the gap between dreams and reality." The Dreamweaver reached out a hand, its fingers shimmering with an unearthly light. "Join me," it said. "Together we can weave dreams into the waking world, reshaping reality itself." Olivia felt a pull, an almost irresistible urge to take the Dreamweaver's hand. But she hesitated, remembering the fortune teller's warning. "What happens if I refuse?" she asked, her voice trembling. The Dreamweaver's smile faded, its eyes growing cold. "Then you will be trapped forever between worlds, never fully awake, never truly dreaming. A fate worse than death." Olivia's mind raced. She thought of her quiet life, her books, the simple pleasures of her waking world. Then she thought of the wonders she had seen in her dreams, the infinite possibilities they represented. In that moment, Olivia made her choice. She reached out, her fingers almost touching the Dreamweaver's, but at the last second she pulled back. "No," she said, her voice growing stronger. "My dreams are my own. I won't let you control them. Or me." The Dreamweaver's face contorted with rage. The ballroom began to crumble around them, mirrors shattering into glittering shards. Olivia felt herself falling, tumbling through darkness. She woke with a gasp, sunlight streaming through her window. For a moment she lay still, afraid to open her eyes fully. But as she became aware of her surroundings, she realized something had changed. The world around her seemed sharper, more vivid. Colors were brighter, sounds clearer, and yet there was no trace of the dream objects that had plagued her for weeks. Olivia smiled, realizing that in rejecting the Dreamweaver, she had claimed her power for herself. The boundary between dreams and reality was still thin for her, but now she could control it. As she got ready for work, Olivia felt a new sense of excitement. Her life would never be ordinary again, but it would be hers to shape, one dream at a time. The attic of the old Blackwood mansion had remained untouched for decades, a repository of forgotten memories and dust-covered relics. On a stormy Saturday night, 5 friends decided to explore its musty confines, seeking thrills and perhaps a few trinkets to take home as souvenirs. Little did they know that their innocent adventure would unleash forces beyond their comprehension, setting in motion a chain of events that would forever alter their lives. Mark, the self-appointed leader of the group, was the first to spot the ornate wooden box tucked away in a corner. Its surface was etched with strange symbols and what appeared to be a warning in a language none of them recognized. "Hey guys, check this out," Mark called, his flashlight beam dancing across the box's intricate designs. The others gathered around: Sarah, the skeptic, Tom, the jokester, Lisa, the worrier, and Jake, the quiet one. They watched as Mark carefully lifted the lid, revealing a board game unlike any they had seen before. The game board was made of dark wood, its surface divided into a spiraling path of ornate squares. Strange figurines, carved from what looked like bone, served as playing pieces. A set of dice, black as night, completed the set. "Shadows of Eternity," Tom read from the lid. "Sounds spooky, let's play." Despite Lisa's protests and Sarah's eye-rolling, the group decided to try out the game. They settled in a circle on the attic floor, the board between them, illuminated by their flashlights. As Mark unfolded the rules, a gust of wind howled outside, rattling the windows. The flames of the candles they had lit flickered ominously. "It says here," Mark began, "that each player must choose a figurine and place it on the starting square. The goal is to reach the center of the spiral, but be warned, each move comes with a price." They each selected a piece, feeling an odd chill as their fingers touched the cold bone. Mark rolled the dice first. As they clattered across the board, the candles suddenly went out, plunging the attic into darkness. When they managed to relight them, they gasped. Mark's piece had moved on its own, landing on a square marked with a skull. Before anyone could speak, Mark let out a strangled cry. His skin had turned ashen, his eyes sunken as if he had aged years in seconds. "What's happening?" Sarah demanded, her skepticism giving way to fear. But the game wasn't finished. An unseen force compelled Tom to take his turn. As his piece moved, the attic filled with disembodied whispers speaking in languages long dead. With each turn, the friends witnessed horrors beyond imagination. Lisa's hair turned white with fright when shadows peeled off the walls, reaching for her with grasping tendrils. Jake, usually so quiet, screamed in terror as insects poured from his mouth every time he tried to speak. Sarah, the last to play, watched in horror as her reflection in an old mirror aged rapidly, withering into a corpse before her eyes. They tried to stop, to put the game away, but found they couldn't. Some dark power compelled them to continue, drawing them deeper into its twisted world. As they played on, the line between the game and reality blurred. The attic seemed to expand, the walls fading away to reveal nightmarish landscapes. Creatures of shadow and flame lurked at the edges of their vision, hungering for the moment when a player would lose. Hours passed, though it felt like days. The friends were haggard, their minds strained to the breaking point by the horrors they had witnessed. But as dawn approached, a glimmer of hope appeared. Jake's piece was just one roll away from the center. "If I make it," he rasped, his voice still raw from the insects, "the rules say the game ends and everything goes back to normal." The others held their breath as Jake rolled the dice. Time seemed to slow as the black cubes tumbled across the board. They came to rest, showing just enough to reach the center. A howl of rage echoed through the attic as Jake moved his piece to the final square. The board began to shake, cracks appearing in its surface. The figurines melted like wax, and the dice crumbled to dust. In a final, furious explosion of dark energy, the game collapsed in on itself. The friends were thrown backward, their heads spinning. When they came to, sunlight was streaming through the attic windows. The game was gone, leaving no trace of its existence. Slowly they realized that the horrors they had experienced had faded like a bad dream. But as they looked at each other, they knew it had been real. Though no physical signs remained, they could see the shadow of what they had endured in each other's eyes. They made a pact then, swearing never to speak of what had happened. The game was gone, but they knew others like it might exist. Their innocence was lost, replaced by the heavy knowledge that dark forces lurked just beyond the veil of everyday life. As they left the Blackwood mansion, each of them carried a piece of the darkness with them. In quiet moments, they would feel its pull, hear its whispers. The game of shadows was over, but its echoes would haunt them for the rest of their lives. And somewhere in the depths of forgotten places, other games waited. Waited for unwitting players to stumble upon them, to unleash their terrifying power once again. For in the eternal struggle between light and dark, the game is never truly over. It only pauses, biding its time until the next move can be made. The key turned in the lock with a rusty groan, echoing through the empty halls of Blackwood Manor. Thomas Everett stood on the threshold, his hand trembling slightly as he pushed open the heavy oak door. The musty scent of age and neglect washed over him, a stark reminder of the years the mansion had stood abandoned. Thomas had never expected to inherit anything, let alone a sprawling estate. Yet here he was, the sole heir to his great-uncle's fortune and this imposing structure that loomed before him. As he stepped inside, the floorboards creaked beneath his feet, as if protesting this intrusion after years of solitude. The foyer was grand, with a sweeping staircase that curved up to the second floor. Dust-covered paintings lined the walls, their subjects hidden beneath layers of grime. Thomas moved further into the house, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. He had come alone, against the advice of his friends and the family lawyer. There was something about this place that called to him, a pull he couldn't explain. As he explored the ground floor, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. In the library, Thomas ran his fingers along the spines of ancient books. A chill ran down his spine, and he turned quickly, certain he had seen movement out of the corner of his eye. But the room was empty, save for the dust motes dancing in the pale sunlight that filtered through the grimy windows. As night fell, Thomas settled into one of the bedrooms he had managed to clean. Sleep came fitfully, filled with strange dreams of whispered conversations and fleeting shadows. He woke with a start in the middle of the night, his heart pounding. There, at the foot of his bed, stood a figure. It was translucent, shimmering in the moonlight that streamed through the window. Thomas blinked, certain he was still dreaming, but the figure remained, its sad eyes fixed on him. Who are you?" Thomas stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. The figure smiled, a melancholy expression that seemed to hold years of sorrow. "I am Elizabeth Blackwood," it said, its voice like a soft breeze. "I lived here and died here, as did many others." Thomas sat up, his fear giving way to curiosity. "Others?" Elizabeth nodded, her form flickering slightly. "We are bound to this place, unable to move on. Each of us has unfinished business, tasks left undone in life that keep us tethered to this world." As if on cue, more figures began to appear in the room. An elderly man in a smoking jacket, a young woman in a maid's uniform, a child clutching a teddy bear. Each spirit had a story, a reason for their continued presence in Blackwood Manor. Over the next few days, Thomas found himself living in a world between the living and the dead. By day, he explored the mansion, uncovering its secrets and long-forgotten treasures. By night, he listened to the tales of the spirits, learning of their lives and the circumstances of their deaths. There was old Mr. Blackwood, Elizabeth's father, who had hidden away a fortune in gold coins somewhere on the property. He couldn't rest until it was found and put to good use. The maid, Sarah, had been wrongly accused of theft and dismissed without references. She longed to clear her name. Little Timothy, the child spirit, simply wanted his favorite toy car, lost somewhere in the vast attic. Each spirit had a request, a final task that needed completion before they could find peace. Thomas threw himself into helping the spirits, driven by a mix of compassion and a growing attachment to the ghostly residents of Blackwood Manor. He dug up the garden, searching for old Mr. Blackwood's gold. He pored over household accounts, proving Sarah's innocence. He spent hours in the dusty attic until he found Timothy's toy car. As each spirit's request was fulfilled, they would smile, their forms growing brighter before fading away. Thomas felt a bittersweet mix of joy and loss with each departure. But not all the spirits were benevolent. In the West Wing, Thomas encountered a dark presence, a spirit filled with anger and malice. This entity had no desire for peace, only a thirst for chaos and fear. It manifested as swirling shadows, its voice a guttural growl that shook the very foundations of the house. It sought to drive Thomas away, to keep the other spirits trapped in their limbo. Thomas found himself caught in a battle between light and dark, the peaceful spirits rallying around him as he faced off against this malevolent force. The mansion became a battleground, with objects flying through the air and doors slamming on their own. In the final confrontation, Thomas stood in the grand foyer, surrounded by the spirits he had helped. Together, they faced the dark entity. Thomas, drawing strength from the spirits and his own newfound courage, stood his ground. "This is my home now," he declared, his voice steady. "And theirs. You have no power here anymore." With a howl of rage, the dark spirit lunged at Thomas. but the other spirits formed a protective circle around him, their light growing brighter and brighter until it was blinding. When the light faded, the dark presence was gone. In the aftermath, the remaining spirits began to fade, their unfinished business complete. Elizabeth was the last to go, her smile radiant as she thanked Thomas for bringing peace to Blackwood Manor. As dawn broke, Thomas stood alone in the foyer. The house felt different now, lighter somehow. He realized that in helping the spirits find peace, he had found his own purpose. Blackwood Manor was more than just an inheritance. It was a new beginning. Thomas smiled, running his hand along the banister of the grand staircase. The house creaked, but it was a friendly sound now. He was home, and though the spirits were gone, their stories would live on through him.
We hope you enjoyed this chilling tale. If it sent shivers down your spine, give us a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. What was your favorite part? Don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss a scare. Until next time, stay spooky and remember, sometimes the darkest shadows hide the most terrifying secret.